All right, let's bring in Zac Jackson from Mobile.
We got Zach. A quick reminder that the Cleveland Monsters are turning into the Lake Erie Monsters. They're back for one weekend only on January 30th and 31st at Rocket Arena. It starts with a 1, 2, 3 Friday and a Battle Together t-shirt giveaway courtesy of True North Convenience Stores for the first 5,000 fans. Then on Saturday, the first 8,000 fans receive a Zach Renensky bobblehead courtesy of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Enjoy returning players, themed jerseys, Calder Cup photo opportunities, and more in this step back into time to 2016. Tickets are on sale now at clevelandmonsters.com.
Is Zac Jackson going to have a bobblehead, Mike?
He should.
When are we getting a Zac Jackson bobblehead?
What about a Todd Monken bobblehead?
Todd Monken. Yeah, who's more likely to win a championship right now, Zach? The Monsters or the Browns?
I'm not up on the Monsters record, but I'm going to go with the Monsters pretty strong.
I have no idea what their record is, but I think that's a safe bet. Your reaction, Todd Monken, the new head coach.
Yeah, it obviously wasn't plan A, or it would have been done before this, right? Yeah. So, to me, bigger than the process, bigger than the who right now. This is not a very good job, right? And that's the reality. So it's on Todd Monken to make the best of it. The Browns did believe in him, right? They requested the interview before even the shakeup in Baltimore happened. He'd been in the building before for one disastrous year. He has produced offenses. What was it? Lamar's 41-4 2 years ago. 41 touchdown passes. The Browns have 35 touchdown passes over the last 2 seasons. So this guy has a proven track record, but this is a big fix. So to me, guys, this was about an agreement to keep Jim Schwartz. And really, this is saying that the Browns expect to win a number of games and not a total tank. You go with a guy half of Monken's age, you're letting him grow into the job. You're expecting winning on some level, and you're expecting him to be really, really good because there's not a lot of pieces. So now it's build the staff, then it's go get the pieces, and we'll have a better judge then. But this certainly was not plan A. And like I said, that doesn't mean that it's a complete disaster, but this is a bad job right now. And so we'll see where it goes.
Zach, what was the difference between Jim Schwartz and Todd Monken? Obviously, there were two of the last candidates, left standing with some sort of with the most experience. Why do you think that they chose Monken over Jim Schwartz? And B, do you think Jim Schwartz will still be on this roster, or excuse me, staff as a defensive coordinator?
I do. I'll start with B, Garrett. I do think so. I do think that's part of the hire. Now, I hadn't really thought about the first part of it too much, but it has to be the offense, right? It has to be that they wanted an offensive coach. So it was a strange search. It was a prolonged search for a guy that nobody else was after. They believe in what they do. The rest of us look at the results. So, but as it stands right now, I do think it will be a Schwartz-Monken combo. Now, that is mostly up to Jim Schwartz. He is under contract. Standard protocol says you let these guys go when you go. But I am under the assumption right now, an hour after the hire coming out, that Jim Schwartz will be there and that the plan was, to keep that defense intact, to keep a lot of the defensive staff, if not almost all of the defensive staff, intact. Make a hire of a young offensive coordinator who can grow into his role. And we'll see. But, it's clear they think a lot of Jim Schwartz, Garrett, but it's an interesting question because they didn't think enough of him to hire, even as they went along and didn't have other options for various reasons and kept him in the mix. Talking to him first was because he was already in the building. But to go on this process and not land on the hot young candidate, but still want to keep Jim Schwartz, it's going to be awkward. And we'll see. This whole thing is awkward.
Zach, you had an article taking you back to 2019 with The Athletic, where you said that there were multiple sources that told The Athletic that Todd Monken was on the field before games telling people what a disaster Cleveland was and that they didn't run things the way that he wanted, blah, blah, blah. Paraphrasing some of that. He was here. He saw the dysfunction, and he came back. Is he just like, man, I'm going to steal Jimmy's money? What's the idea? I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, so that absolutely happened, Dustin, but that was a lifetime ago, right? The day after that happened, they fired everybody, and the days after that happened, they fired everybody. They moved along, and they had this 6-year Barry and Stefanski run. So obviously, ownership knew of him and tracked him, and it was easy because he spent the last 3 years in the AFC North. But obviously he believes that he can win here, and that he believes that was mostly on Freddie. And that was directly in that Todd was the offensive coordinator. And not only did he and Freddie's offenses never mix, but he was saying they were doing things during the week and installing things, and then those weren't translating to the field. So I am interested to see if he's going to call his own plays or if he's going to hire a young guy to do that. The trend has been for head coaches to do that, but that absolutely happened. It's absolutely going to make its rounds today. But this is a different organization, and like I said, I'm not defending what went on here, but I think we all need, to an extent, to say, okay, this has to work. Like, this is what they've chosen. They're going to give it a chance to work. And what's the worst? Like, it almost can't be worse than it's been. So they believe in Todd Monken's vision, in his offensive prowess, and his ability to build and rev up offenses. So the problem here, regardless of who's the coach, is they're just in the early stages of building. But if they can do a little building, keep the defense together, and then Monken really is the guy to rev it up, then you're onto something. And we don't know that right now. But we're left here thinking that Nate Shieldhouse didn't take the job because he just wasn't comfortable with the setup. And so we're left to think that Todd Monken's comfortable with the setup, and people are like, you did a month-long search for Todd Monken?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And to your point, you mentioned, and everybody's saying that obviously the Browns want to keep Schwartz, and that was part of the deal. I was saying if I were him, I'd be pissed. I'd be more pissed with this situation than I would be if they hired a young guy. At least I could understand that. You don't think he's going to want to leave? I hope he doesn't, but I think if he does, that's a disaster.
I think that's fair, Bull. I don't want to put words in his mouth because we don't know. He gave the political answer. He went through the interview process. I think if we're looking at anybody's words and the only actual evidence we have, Jimmy and Andrew didn't exactly on those Monday press conferences give the feeling that Jim Schwartz was going to be considered a serious candidate, right? And at that point, it was just starting. So this is about how they feel and what they think they can make work. And the defense was obviously always a part of that. And they should be proud and happy and excited about it. Should be disappointed that defense got wasted. So it just is interesting. Now, there's no direct link in the past from Monken and Schwartz. They're around the same age. Maybe it can fit. But it just feels like that other candidates, at least one, were not comfortable with that, and that he was. And so we'll see. So, does he get more angry now? That's a great question, but I don't want to put words in his mouth.
No.
Is there any thought here, Zach, just top of your head, kind of reading the tea leaves here with this hire, how it would affect Shedeur Sanders, if at all?
Well, his best offense is throwing the ball down the field. I think that's one of the things that Shedeur is best at. So that is interesting because we're still a month plus from getting to the how in the fix of this here. But I think when you take a step back from last year and look at the whole situation, Shedeur was a developmental quarterback, remains a developmental quarterback. He got to play almost half the season, even though he was not in the plans at all for the other half, right? And he did some good things, even in his bad games, of which there were multiple. He had good moments, good drives, good quarters in all but one. That experience should be valuable. So I'm interested to see how Shedeur comes back and handles the strengths program, the new offense, the new coaching, everything. But, I think right now, before we know what decisions are made, what realistic options, and what Todd Monken really thinks about Shedeur Sanders, I think this is probably your day one starter, or at least the guy who enters some sort of competition with an edge. That could change in March, but that doesn't appear that it's going to change in April, right? Like, it doesn't appear that the Browns are going to be in position to draft a day one quarterback. It appears that they're going to make March decisions based on who's available and what they have to spend, and that any draft decision would be about a second-round quarterback, a third-round quarterback, or maybe a 24. But I would say that this leads to Shedeur even being more likely as the day one starter or the leader at this early stage.
Zach, do you feel like the Browns, after they had the season, right? So they go out after the season, Jimmy has them, he says, about the thing about not being dysfunctional. And also, he said that they should have won more football games. when I look at this hire and, their willingness and their gun-ho-ness to keep, Jim Schwartz, and the fact that you went out and got Todd Monken, who was a seasoned play caller, not only in the professional ranks but in college, it kind of told me a little bit that maybe they wanted to establish a higher floor where if we do go get with some young guys, the two guys, Udinski and Shieldhouse, had never even called plays before. So if you bring in, Monken, who has the ability and has had some good offenses, maybe that boosts you and puts you at a level where maybe you don't lose a couple of games because of bad play calling or clock management or something along those lines. Is that one of the reasons you believe that they really could have took a look at what was going on with Monken?
Yeah. I mean, Garrett, my first read on this is that they expect to have a decent team, right? Like, this is not embracing 2027 and beyond. Like, that would have been the coach in his 30s. That would have been the nearly unprecedented hire that lacked experience at the highest level positions, right? Todd Monken has 11 years of NFL experience. He's been a coordinator on 3 different teams. He's been in good situations, bad situations. He's throwing the ball down the field. He was here in this organization. He's been in this division. And so when you look at it now, the guy about to turn 60 years old, who's, been coaching since his early 20s and done all these things that you see on the screen there, pairing him with Jim Schwartz and keeping this defense together. Yes, the expectation is that the Browns should win more, right, or prepared to win more. Maybe it is just a couple of breaks. Certainly it is just subtle improvements on that offense should go a long way. To me, regardless of who was going to hire here and what the other hires here, it's always been about adding pieces and retooling an offensive line that's a year behind on that process. But yeah, I absolutely read it as this front office and this ownership does not want to be winning 5 games or does not want to be playing next December out of contention. If it comes to be, it comes to be, and we'll see. But I think they expect to establish a style that's not completely ugly and hopeless on offense, but relies on the defense to muck these games up and win and create an identity here. Because frankly, through 6 years, and the Watson trade tanked this, but through 6 years, the only identity they've established is this Schwartz defense.
Zach, when you, I'm just thinking about what you said and how because they hired him, they're pushing all their chips in to some degree to try to win more now. So do you think they could be, I know you said this could be a good thing for Shedeur and it's interesting, but is it possible that this gets them to go after a veteran? Because a veteran quarterback is going to give them a better chance to win, at least this year.
It is, Bull. Now, I wonder what those realistic options are.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're going to make a trade for Mac Jones, you're going to give up at least a semi-decent asset. You're going to need him and the 49ers on board. And you're probably going to have to win an auction to do that. Right. So it does. I think Malik Willis probably played himself into where he's going to get a multi-year contract and at least a somewhat guarantee. I mean, look what Justin Fields got last year. Now, that was a real commitment. The Jets are out of it after 1 year, but that was a real commitment. The Jets are the Jets. The Browns are the Browns. The Browns are doing this to stop being the Browns, quite frankly. So, I think it does. I think we're way far away from that. But yeah. I don't look at the Browns starting Deshaun Watson as any sort of anything other than that end last resort option. So when I look at what's realistically available and who's on the roster, I think it's Shedeur and a new addition. And I think that addition is probably more likely to come from down the line in the draft, knowing that Shedeur is on a tryout, knowing that Deshaun is still here and maybe eventually gets a tryout, or maybe that you take a chance on someone in the Trey Lance category. Right? Like the Browns have never wanted Jimmy Garoppolo and the 7 opportunities they've had to get him. If they would have gotten Shieldhouse, like they were together, they had some sort of relationship. So who's in Monken's background? Well, Jameis Winston is, Josh Johnson was the Ravens backup. Like that's not realistic. Tyler Huntley, he knows his way to Cleveland. We'll see, who that is and how that is. But I feel pretty strongly that obviously it could change, that everything points to Shedeur right now.
All right, but Zach, here's the scenario. Now you got an idea in my head about Jameis. The Browns trade a 6th-round pick to the Giants for Jameis. Mm-hmm. They trade a 1st-round pick to the Cardinals, their 24th pick. Sorry, they trade the 24th pick to the Jaguars for Brian Thomas Jr. They sign Romeo Doubs in free agency. They draft 2 offensive linemen in the first round. And there you go. The offense could be much improved next year with that, no?
They fixed it. You're hired, Bull. You're in. So we're going to miss you on the show. Yeah, I do think that adding a veteran receiver is not like a maybe. I think it's a must.
Yeah.
Now, what is truly the investment? I think realistically, if a Brian Thomas Jr. or a a Marvin Harrison Jr. is available, I think you pursue that. But what actually is the cost? What are the other suitors? I don't know. But like I said, I'm surprised by this hire on many levels, but one of them is I thought just hiring the young guy was an easy way to subtly wrap your arms around where you were and go for that job security. If you're in the front office, which you somehow have, but you probably shouldn't because you've done nothing to earn it. Whereas now my initial read on this, and it's still January, and no moves can be made till March 9th. My initial read in this is the Browns expect to win a number of games, a number that's higher than what they've been doing, and they expect this defense and what eventually will be a much improved offense to create better results. And we'll see if they're right. I mean, Todd Monken's offenses have been good, but look at the pieces. And the Ravens had offensive line problems this year especially. Obviously, Lamar was the biggest thing. The Browns have offensive line problems, as in they don't really have many NFL offensive linemen under contract.
Zach, totally unfair hypothetical. If the Browns are able to pick Arch Manning next year, will Todd Monken coach him?
That is a great question.
Loaded question.
And it's a loaded question. The answer could be no, Dustin. It could be. I mean, I think 3 wins is in play. Sure.
Yeah.
That absolutely is. But today is January 28th? Like, I'm much more comfortable on March 28th with conversations about what this team is going to look like and what's really going to be expected. It's just my vibe right now. If you're hiring a coach who turns 60 next week and you're doing it in part because you were insistence on keeping the defensive coordinator who turned 60 this year, I think, right? And you look at like the investments you've already made in Garrett, in Ward, in Delpit, in having Schlesinger here, in constantly adding defensive tackle after defensive tackle, like you're expecting this guy to build a competent offense and turn that into something.
Zach, I got one question for you real quick. You are in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Can you give us one thing that we should know about any of the anything that's going on in Mobile this week that would apply to Browns fans?
I can, Mike, but I want to say one other thing first that I started to answer this before and I got sidetracked because I'm in this crowded hallway, which is why I keep looking around because it's major traffic. Todd Monken is going to bring a level of candor and bluntness to the podium and to the organization that we just hadn't seen. And obviously, as the losses mounted, people started to point that out with Stefanski. But my question is, is that what this organization really wanted? Because they've run from the truth. And I think they did start to wrap their arms around the fact that last year wasn't going to be very good. But then they fired the coach for not winning enough. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And you should never, ever, or rarely ever would you hire a guy and say, of course, we're only going to win a few games this year. We stink. But Todd Monken's going to come in and he's going to tell the truth about what he sees, what he expects, what's gone wrong. That's why Dustin referenced that from 6 years ago. That's a completely different lifetime ago in the NFL, but that was going on. That's who he was and who he is. So as far as being here, Mike, there's 2 things I can tell you in a short amount of time. One is one of the guys creating buzz here is Tyron Montgomery from John Carroll right down the street. Yes, Division III, the only Division II or Division III guy here. He was awesome in practice yesterday. I got to meet him real briefly. I thought I'd get to talk to him longer this morning, and that hasn't happened to this point. But he's a fascinating story, and he's fast. He can fly. He went to the American Bowl, which is for guys at lower levels just trying to get an opportunity, and he was so good he immediately got invited here, and he was so good on day one. He posted one of the top speeds. He's all over the internet. I had to wait in line just to talk with him. Frank Ross, the Houston Texans special teams coach, who's a John Carroll alum, was running up to see him, and congratulate him on being here. So it's a wild story. And secondly, it's not a great quarterback class that's here. And it's not a good quarterback class that's here. But Garrett Nussmeier is here. And a lot of people believe that Garrett Nussmeier would have been a top 20 to 40 pick in last year's draft. And he went back to LSU for his senior year. It was a nightmare. He got hurt. He turned the ball over. He didn't have a good offensive line. The coach got fired. He got benched and then he got hurt again. So this is a big week for him. It's a big part of the process. A healthy Garrett Nussmeier is an NFL quality quarterback, I think. What do the teams think? How can he use this week in the process to make up for the lost time and show what he's worth? And then again, like in this class, could he still be drafted in the top 40? Could he still be drafted in the top 25? Sounds crazy right now, but I don't think it's out of the question because there's not a lot of quarterbacks to go around. When Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 yesterday, Mendoza was number 1. Everybody knows that's a done deal, right? The next quarterback was number 40, Ty Simpson, who also has injuries, who also only played 1 year. Nussmeier's a known commodity. His dad coaches in the league. He started multiple years at LSU, and his good is really good. So Dane Brugler, our draft guy at The Athletic, was adamant preseason that he would have had Nussmeier ahead of Jackson Dart last year.
Zach, awesome insight. Thank you. Have fun at the Senior Bowl, and we'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate you.
Can't wait to get back to the cold, guys.